Okay, folks, so as some people know, I've been attending housing task force meetings in Peterborough to try and help deal with the housing shortage that we have and the problems associated with available affordable housing in the area. Back in December, we were given some data. It was census data, and it was very hyper specific about Peterborough. The data is not especially accessible, so I wanted to try and take some time to break that down and explain to folks sort of what it all means. And at any rate, I'm going to jump into it here. There's been a rise in single family unit occupancy. If you compare that to building permits dating back to as early as 2007, you'll notice that right around that time we stopped building a lot of single family housing units and we started just investing more in multi-family housing. But we're still going to see shifts, and predominantly most of that demand and sale, that's all going to happen in the single family home market, because realistically we may have added units in the multifamily, but it doesn't anywhere near offset just the sheer amount of houses in the area. And that's what's available, and it's very expensive to build right now. So we just see that is a constraint that I won't talk so much about in this, but cost of building is going to be a huge factor there. 10% increase in single family ownership, 2.3% increase for multifamily. Single family means like it doesn't have any dictation of how big that family is or who's going to fill in that space. It just simply means that this particular building is only meant to house one family. When you actually get into family size breakdowns, the thing that becomes abundantly clear right away is that we might not be catering to the market appropriately, because what the AARP refers to as the traditional nuclear family is at slightly less than half the population of the town. The other slightly less than half the population of the town is just single adults. That's just non-family residences. And then there's about 11% right there in the middle that's just single parents. The average person per family household in Peterborough is 2.8. And again, this is an average, so it's not like I can take those samples and say, oh yeah, well, we only have parents with one kid in town. Like, that's not true. What it likely means is that we have some families that have maybe 4 or 5 people in the household, and then we have some families that are just a couple. And that married couple counts as a family. That accounts for 1,223 households in town compared to the non-family, which is 1,206. And then there's 374 reported single parent family households in town. It's important to note that 11%, that like those 374 households are likely struggling. It is likely very difficult for them, because all of these numbers are based off of affordability for what you make as an individual. So everything that I'm saying here is also, it scales outward. But when you're talking about a single parent, that parent would likely be facing a much tougher challenge. From 2013 to 2017, there was a 30% increase in 2 beds, 34% increase in 3 beds, but only a 14% increase in 1 beds, and a 2% increase in no bedroom units. 2-bed units are down 3%, and 3-bed units are up 4%. So it's, on the whole, again, statistically, the average is it's within a margin of error. The new tours that they're giving to folks that are trying to move here are generally young couples. It's entirely likely that their first thing when they get here is not to immediately have a child and do nothing else. They probably want to go enjoy things, enjoy the area that we live in. What do I know? if we're not catering to that particular set of people, if we're not going to be willing to offer 2-bed units to people, um, or 3-bed units, then that's a problem. That will be an issue. Something else to note is that demographic, say like around 23 to 44, are just on the whole earning less, like a much greater number of people in that demographic are earning less than $45,000 a year, which is definitionally low income. Those people are also likely going to be shouldered with student debt, so they need lower cost housing, because that's one of those expenses that you want to reduce as much as you possibly can while you're trying to pay off your student loans and repair your credit, so that you can actually qualify to go get a mortgage on a house or get a loan from a bank. Affordable housing, this concept of affordable housing, is based off of this idea that your housing costs should be no more than 30% of your gross income. That is the metric that we use to determine affordability here. And generally speaking, it makes sense to approach trying to solve the problem that way. I want to entertain a hypothetical here where we don't calculate housing out first. And what I'd prefer to do is say that you have to account for your transportation costs and you have to account for your food costs first. We live in the middle of the woods here, and you have to have a car to get anywhere. I think transportation is something you absolutely need to factor in. That also has to do with your proximity to where you work or get your food, all of that. Again, in this context, I think you gotta account for being able to eat, because otherwise, how are you going to have energy to do labor if you do not have fuel to do that? I'm gonna break this down on the paycheck to paycheck level, and I'm going to talk about it like that because, frankly, that's how most people experience things. You can talk about what you make a month, and that's all well and good. But for somebody who literally has to worry from week to week, it makes far more sense to talk about it in those terms. So I want to create that baseline of this is the framework. This is why we're choosing this particular interval. Let's say you're a single adult and you're working in customer service. You're making roughly $17.55 an hour pre-tax. You get paid bi-weekly. Roughly, their paychecks look like $11.13. That's your take home, okay? $1,113. Out of that, you've paid for your health insurance, your dental, all of that's come out pre-tax. Then you've paid your tax. Okay, cool. So this is your number. This is what you're actually working with. So we're going to get to transportation. Let's say you got a car payment. We'll say it's $100 off of each paycheck. It's going to take you down to $1,013 after that car payment. You know, we're talking about this like you're in Peterborough, New Hampshire. So we'll say you have to drive outside of the town in order to do work. We'll say that, it's $20 on gas per week. Okay. Double that out, 40 off the paycheck brings you down to $973. I'm going to ignore everything that the FDA says about needing personal care products or apparel, services, housekeeping supplies, anything like that. Like, we'll just assume that nobody needs soap ever, okay? And we're just going to talk about food. Like, all of that other stuff aside, you're not doing any personal care. We're not going to consider that. We're going to call that a luxury, and that will come out of your expendable income after we've taken your rent out, okay? So right now we're just going to talk about making sure that you've got food. For one person, right? A one-person household, they say $386 a month, so about $193 per paycheck, right? That you're setting aside roughly $96.50 a week to eat, which is I would say that's decent. I'd say you're eating well, but you're also not eating like you can eat decently for $96.50 a week, but um you're certainly not going out to eat a lot. Maybe once. But I mean, and again, it depends on the ingredients you buy. I If you're trying to be healthy, that can be a difficult mark to meet, especially if you don't have the time to do all of your own cooking. If you're just simply tapped out on your schedule. $193 per paycheck, that takes you down to 780 off that 973. You get these two paychecks, 780 a piece. We'll zoom out. We're going to talk about the month again. And because you're paying rent on the monthly. So we have to think, but yeah, we move paycheck to paycheck, but what are you thinking about in terms of the monthly? So if we're going to calculate affordability, we're going to calculate that affordability now off of this new number 1560 that we've established. That's what you've got to play around with. Actually, that's like after you've fed yourself and you've made sure that you can get to work. So 1560 times 0.3 or 30% gives you $468 a month to work with. That's not including your utilities. That's not including so many things, that like say your debt, your repairs to your car. There are only 66 of the 918 rental units that are at or below $500. Just 66. And that's occupied currently. There are 680 more jobs that need to be filled in this town than there are homes for those workers. So it's important that we deal with the dynamic here of age and income. For households that are 45 years or under, and they earn under $75,000 a year, there's 387, so 61% of them compared to the 38% that are over. Okay, so there's a majority of people under 45 that do not make more than 75,000 in this area. Now, if we hop up to over 45 crowd and try and look at that same marker, 43% are under to about 56% over. So the majority of people over the age of 45, they cross that $75,000 a year threshold. Something to understand about $75,000 a year is that is the point at which you are all set, essentially. Things change slightly if you bump it down a little more to your low income mark. So like $45,000 a year. We find that young people are actually, a majority of them are over this line. There is the certain caveat if I say young people here, but under 45 does not mean young. It's not as much of a challenge to create that type of security for yourself with 45 years on the planet as compared to say 25 or 30. Okay, there's a difference there. So you've got 64% under 45 or over 45K, which is essentially good news. If we get up to the over 45 crowd, when it comes to the percentage that's making over $45,000 a year, 75%. 75% of that aging population does not experience being low income in that way. The 45K earning mark is like right in the neighborhood of many jobs in the area, and it's also barely enough to do like a $125,000 house. It would need a lot of work though, that house. Let's be clear. I'm going to get into the details on that house, and I'm going to get into the details on these numbers. To do this, let's be clear, 53 units listed, 17 between 60 and 70K, 14 housing units listed at less than 10K. We'll assume you've got this person with this $45,000 a year that's trying to get this $125,000 house. We'll assume that they have a credit score of like 660 to 679. We'll say that they are able to do a $5,000 down payment, which is, again, for someone earning $45,000 a year, to set aside $5,000 just because is tough. You got a 30-year fixed mortgage, which is pretty long. Puts you roughly at $600 a month. Local property taxes about $313.44 a month. We'll just say $313, okay? Pre-utilities, right? Just for the mortgage and the property tax alone, you're at $913 a month. Just that mortgage is 27.4% of income at 40K, okay? So like right there, right at that 40K line, you're like just underneath that 30%, 31.3% at 35K a year, which is much more like what people make. That's a lot closer to that $17.55 an hour customer service rep we were talking about before. You know, say you earn 30K a year, 36.5% of your income. The affordable end of things, you've got about $210 for utilities and just, you know, that's like electric, internet, heat. And I say heat, I'm saying natural gas here. I'm choosing the lesser of the costs. $1,123 a month, or $13,476 a year. If I go and I look at the types of jobs that are available in this area and like what they pay, you could live here if you were a manager, software developer, analyst, aerobics instructor, police officer. These are the jobs that you can have and afford to live here. But if you are a teacher, maintenance worker, cook, waiter, clerk, cashier, production worker, accountant, paramedic, firefighter, carpenter, grocer, all these things, you're going to have a hard time. Every single one of those jobs, you are at or below, and I mean well below, the markers of affordability. Without those jobs being filled, your local economy will collapse. Not everybody can be a manager. And if you're not willing to create housing for the people that would come in and do these lower paying jobs that for whatever reason seem to be maligned by folks, then okay, you can ship the labor in from out of town. But if you want to actually have a diverse community, an economically diverse community where you're welcoming to people of different income brackets, the idea that you would balk at your community changing is absurd because it's baked into what you need to do. Necessarily, a community will change and adapt and become something new as new people come and enter into that community, become a part of it and engage with it, right? That's just how that works. We just shouldn't consider that to be a crisis the way we do. Like, we're so worried about the town changing and yet don't accept the fact that change is exactly what we're demanding as well. If you're not willing to streamline zoning laws and you're not willing to do a bit of deregulation when your market is this restricted, okay, when you have such a little inventory at such a high price point that doesn't match economically what any of the people that or a very, very, very small subsection of the people that you're trying to attract can actually afford, right? When you just simply have this shortage and you want to do something like restrict zoning laws, or you want to, I don't know, prevent things from getting too big, you will, that is in a sense that is restricting. It's a restriction. It's prohibiting a type of building that could exist that could alleviate some of the problems in our area. You're just saying no to it. Okay, you're saying we're not going to be open to this because we're afraid that our view will change, or we're afraid that the character of our community will change, or we're afraid that that we'll lose our open green spaces. Or I'm not sure exactly what every individual person's argument for that would be. If you're not willing to do this, then it seems like there's, maybe we got to lean into it. Maybe we got to lean into the fact that Peterborough is this aging community, and the young people should just leave and go live in other towns. And if they want to enjoy the niceness of Peterborough, they need to come here and then go home when they're done. This is the elephant in the room. This is the part that nobody wants to deal with. Everybody keeps sort of asking these odd rhetorical questions. I don't understand why we can't just talk about, like, okay, so we don't have enough housing. We need more. We need to take what we have and we need to make it affordable. How can we do this? Well, we can subsidize things through the appropriation of funds through TIF districts, which is something that even Governor Sununu, a man who I very frequently disagree with on most issues, I actually concur with him on this, that's a solid way to at least raise money. There's stuff to do this, but I don't see a reason to even go down that road and make all those suggestions to folks if that's not what people in this community actually want. And if you look at the numbers, man, it's clear how much of this community is older. Straight up. It's just the numbers don't tell you that this is some funky, bohemian arts community. No, it's realistically, it's a bunch of affluent older white folks. For a group of people that are essentially producing the identity of the town for which everybody's reaping these benefits of having this creative, unique community, right? Realistically, that work is being done by a small subset of people who are struggling very, very hard to be here. So, look, it's going to come to a point where people in town have to decide whether or not they want to keep those folks in town, these lower earning, not lower value jobs, but just like lesser earning. And I would argue they're probably some of the most valuable things that people could be doing in this community, period. We're not going to provide them housing. Then accept the fact that you are not an artistic community, accept the fact that you are becoming a retirement community, lean into it. Let us all know that we should go build our art mecca somewhere else or whatever, and that'll be that. If these folks who enjoy that don't feel like making that sacrifice, then I don't know what to say. I don't know what other outcomes there could be at this point. And I'm open to hearing them. I'm open to discussing them. I mean, there's a lot of ways things could play out, but ultimately it's going to be some iteration of either this community chooses to no longer sustain its lower earning folks and doesn't want to be that type of job producer, materials producer, content, creative, all of it. If we want to be that, that's okay. But let's make a decision now.